And here we are. Are we here? Let us see. You know, but I don't. And I will know momentarily. I don't want to kill any great lines before we know that you, the people, can hear them. This is up and going out to the internet. Today we use the isolating technology of anomie known as social media to connect people. And for a change, we'll see how that works. Welcome to Facebook Live with David Eby. I'm your host, not David Eby. I am comedian Charlie Demers, and I'm pleased to be here with, I am blanking on your name. David Eby, MLA for Point Grey, Vancouver Point Grey. Do you have a preference? I know that's like picking between children.
It's all my favorite.
Yeah, they're all my favorites.
Absolutely.
He knows what he's doing. David, I have, first of all, thank you for having me here. How are you feeling?
I feel good. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on your show.
Yeah, well, it's the least I can do, given that it takes place here in your campaign office. Now, I have, from the very beginning here, surrendered my journalistic objectivity by wearing a button that says David Eby on it, though in my defense, that could be any David Eby. But I'm going to start with a tough question, and I hope you don't mind. Do you feel that you owe an apology to the people of Westside Kelowna for putting Christy Clark in a position where she had to run there?
That's a good start. I actually do feel quite responsible for that, and
they're out there.
I would like to. This is as good an opportunity as any. I would like to apologize to the people of Kelowna Westside for sending Christy Clark your way. Although this election may have a chance to help us fix that problem.
Yes, yeah. I mean, help you help yourself. Now, what do you think? What you're obviously doing a lot of door knocking. You're talking to people on the phones. What are emerging for you as the big themes of this election?
Well, when we're knocking on doors and talking to people here, and I think it's across the province, the issue of housing is really foremost on people's minds. It's our number one issue out here that people tell us about. Mm-hmm. And the issue is
so they still do have doors for you to knock on at this stage in the Vancouver mania. They haven't sold them off.
Those people that we're talking to,
okay,
yes, that's right.
And poking your head through beaded curtains, asking for if anybody's home.
Well, there are some beaded curtains.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so there's a few of those. And but when we talk to people, I mean, it's questions about can they afford the rent? Are their kids going to be able to stay here in Vancouver? Or even in the Lower Mainland? What's the future for our community going to be? And then issues about obviously increasing homelessness and concern about people who don't have doors to knock on and the growth of 10 cities in Metro Vancouver. So it goes all the way on the housing spectrum, concern from people who want to own someday their own home and who do, and then to people who are living in the streets. It's pretty serious.
It feels like housing in BC politics has become like oil in global politics. It's like even when you're not talking about it, you're still talking about it or its effects. I mean, for instance, I go out, and do shows at night. I'm in the arts community here, and before I got this gig, I had to depend on that. And people don't go out in a city where they're paying 80% of their income on rent or on mortgages. They don't go out and buy drinks and keep venues alive. They don't pay for tickets. I mean, it seems to me that even when you're not talking about housing, half the time it feels like we're talking about housing in BC.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot about the tech industry and about arts and culture, and these are industries that depend on people to actually work the jobs. And so if you're in comedy or if you're writing plays or books in Vancouver, it's really hard to, unless you're wildly successful, it's really hard to make a go of it. And I'm impressed that we've held on to our comedy scene and a lot of the arts that happens here, and tech firms that stay here, but it feels time limited because people can do that work really anywhere in the world now, and why wouldn't you do it in a place where it's much cheaper cost of living, where you can actually go out at night, where you actually have some disposable income. Millennials have negative disposable income in Vancouver right now, which is quite an astounding fact that was brought to us by Van City in our economic study of the region.
A lot of people have been critical of us for filming this show in Manitoba, but the tax credits are fantastic. Facebook Live with David Eby, filmed proudly in Churchill, Manitoba. I feel always lucky because I live in co-op, and one of the things that's been very exciting to me about the campaign that the NDP is running this time around is that I've heard that word a lot more. So can you talk a little bit about what some of the plans are for that kind of non-market housing that is, radical idea, primarily about where people live?
Yeah, it's a controversial idea in Vancouver. The co-op's really interesting because it's really in itself an example of the housing crisis. So the federal government used to do a lot of this, and then in the 90s they ended a lot of their support for housing, different kinds of housing, including co-op housing. And the same with purpose-built rental. The federal government stopped being involved in that kind of thing. And so the co-op stock and rental housing stock has been aging, and as it ages, we're running out. So vacancy rates are less than 1% in many different parts of the province. And co-ops, if you go to a co-op and you put your name on a wait list, they'll tell you if they even maintain a wait list, it's years.
My wife is on the membership committee in our co-op, and we're just reopening the list that's been closed for years. And we've been through that whole same, the deregulation that led to the leaky condos. I mean, that affected so much the co-op housing stock in BC. And sorry.
No. I mean, it's no matter, and a lot of the co-ops have subsidized low-income units as well. So people who are paying higher rents, supporting people who are paying lower rents to be able to stay in the building. But there was some federal money that used to support that kind of program, and that funding ended. And so we've made a commitment to continue that funding for various buildings so we don't lose any low-income housing at a time of housing crisis. What we really need is to increase our affordable housing supply, and it doesn't matter whether it's affordable housing for purchase, whether it's co-op, whether it's rental apartments that have actually 2 or 3 bedrooms for families. I mean, just basic stuff that hasn't been done for a long time. It's not controversial, it's worked in the past, and it's been really successful. And there are a lot of co-ops that are a really good example of the kinds of things that we can do if government's actually involved in ensuring affordable housing.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific, and it was very exciting for me. And I realize I've been asked here primarily because I'm a comedian, and we will get back to more frivolous, if you will, things. But I do want to ask a question that is not funny and very difficult, but because of your long experience in the downtown east side, I mean, that's when I met you, was when you were working with Pivot and doing a lot of that good work. The fentanyl crisis in BC is, it's now really reaching quite staggering and terrifying numbers. I mean, there were new numbers out today. I don't have the exact figures off the top of my head, and I don't want to get them wrong, but they are, they're in the hundreds. We're on pace to see more overdose deaths than we did last year. Last year was close to 1,000. I mean, what sort of steps could a provincial government that wanted to tackle this crisis take?
Well, for me, having worked in the neighborhood for a number of years, I see the current crisis as being one more in a long line of crises that have hit the neighborhood. And in the past, we had a huge issue with HIV in the community, lots of people dying from AIDS, and the 3 levels of government came together around that health emergency to try to deal with that, and they came back with needle exchange, with the 4 pillars plan, and so on. So the 3 levels of government working together. The problem was that they didn't address the underlying issue, which is poverty and desperate marginalization. If people feel that they're worthless, if they feel that they have no value in the world, and there's no support to help them realize their potential, we'll address the fentanyl crisis. There will be another crisis for very marginalized populations on the fringes. We need to bring people in together, and there's all kinds of things that we can do that. It starts with housing. It starts with good mental health supports, and there's so many people in the downtown east side. When I worked down there, I bought the best private disability insurance that I could, because there were so many people down there that their story started like this. I was on a job site and I got injured, and then I was on these pain meds, and then I got cut off them, and I needed them to be able to work. And so, and it was just story after story about tragic accident that led people into this terrible situation. And it's a story of failing government programs. It's a story of failed social safety nets. and our marginalization of a huge and growing number of people. When you have more than 70 homeless encampments in Metro Vancouver, no matter how many sort of band-aid solutions you throw at a problem like fentanyl, until you would address that underlying poverty, that's why I'm so proud to run with the NDP at a poverty reduction plan that's actually going to lift people out of poverty, that's going to be really aggressive in getting people out of this marginalized life that they live in, because after fentanyl, there will be another crisis. And it's very predictable that this will happen. It's something that happens in marginalized communities. And we need to make sure that people are resilient and able to deal with these kinds of things. But you have to address the root cause, which is this real poverty and marginalization of the community.
Imagine how stark that might have sounded if you hadn't brought a comedian in to host this talk. It is, but this is such a difficult, because these do feel like such bleak times. The British Columbia under the Liberals has become the most unequal province in Canada. We have all of these just terrible markers that are so, and it feels like last time the NDP tried to run a campaign that was trying to be more positive, or the idea was that they wouldn't go negative, which I always find such a weird way of framing, holding a government accountable for. Can you tell me a bit more about the more, it's a slightly chippier, scrappier campaign that's being run this time?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was talked about a lot in the wake of the last election, when we really should have won, was that we failed to hold the government to account for their decisions. And the decision to not go negative was interpreted by a lot of people to mean don't criticize the government about the decisions that they made. And so this election, the decision was made very early on that we would all work to hold the government to account for decisions, whether it's the refusal to ban big money in our political system, these huge 6- and 7-figure donations coming from people from major corporate interests that have an interest in government decisions.
My favorite are the great white hunters in the United States who have passed the hat around to keep the grizzly ban, to keep grizzly hunt alive in BC, so they can kind of come and do their thing.
A group of American, super privileged American.
You're assuming that they're privileged. I mean, there is a massive kind of working class international hunting,
trophy hunting.
Trophy hunting.
But writing a huge check to the BC Liberals to ensure that we don't end the grizzly trophy hunt. I mean, the fact that BC doesn't ban international donations like that we don't limit individual donations, that we haven't banned union corporate donations, that we're so out of step with the rest of Canada. We're even out of step with the states, where you're not allowed to make donations if you're doing business with government.
Right.
But we see this, companies doing business with government, making donations to the BC Liberals and getting business from government, and that sort of round and around we go. Pace Communications, who does all that publicly funded advertising that the Auditor General said is partisan, this group is actually the group that hosted the April fundraiser for the BC Liberals. So they do the public advertising that the Auditor General has criticized, and then they turn around and they host major fundraisers for the BC Liberal Party. It's quite an astounding thing.
When you're running on a platform of dead bears and school closures, how is this even a contested election? That's the point. That how have they even kept it this competitive? Let's go to you, the internet. For some questions. I'd ask for an in-studio round of applause for Megan, who is Megan, our Paul Schaefer. Megan, what do you have from the internet?
Okay, so I have, if the NDP wins, will you stop the sell-off of BC housing? I live in BC housing and I'm really stressed about it.
If the NDP wins, will you stop? I probably can just allow that question to be asked by Megan and act as conduit to your response.
Well, what the BC Liberals have done is they've taken publicly owned properties like Stamps Landing, which is in Strathcona neighborhood, and they've sold the properties to nonprofit organizations. They've issued mortgages to the nonprofit organizations, and then they're paying the mortgages for those nonprofit organizations. What it does is it frees up money to allow the Liberals to say they're putting more money into housing. But what the Auditor General says is the structure of this program is actually going to cost $1 billion to get $500 million in funding for housing. So it's a very expensive program, and it's one that the Auditor General has been very critical of. So no, we won't be continuing a program that the Auditor General has said is a very flawed and very expensive program. What we're going to do is massively expand the government's role in ensuring affordable housing at all levels of the spectrum, whether it's social housing for people facing homelessness, or rental housing for people trying to find a place to rent who are working in Vancouver and other communities across the province where there's less than 1% vacancy rate, or affordable housing for purchase, which could be different forms, whether it be co-op housing or leasehold housing or different affordable home purchase programs. We're going to be doing all kinds of amazing, innovative things. So the plan of selling off public assets to balance the books, like the BC Liberals have been doing when they sold off Little Mountain and bulldozed that community and left it as a blank and empty field for 10 years. We're not going to
nice field though. A beautiful field.
Well, it's
yeah. What a field. I mean, in fairness, what a field.
It was a vibrant low-income community, but arguably it's a very nice field as well.
Yes, no, I mean, it's just potato in this crazy world of BC politics. I wanted as well to ask you about, you're talking about the sort of, the coziness of, the almost instinct among the BC Liberals to want to bring in for-profit, private enterprise into what should be the provision of public services. And, we saw this with the public-private partnerships around bridges. And I wanted to talk about the decision by the NDP to eliminate the tolls, because I was thrilled to see that, because it seems to me that in the absence of real public transit options for people in the more affordable parts of the Lower Mainland, that was just a kind of regressive flat tax. But a lot of environmentally leaning voters who are right to be concerned about obviously climate change, sprawl, that kind of thing, were critical of the policy. Could you address that? Can you address that question?
Yeah. One of the big problems with the two toll bridges was that they were having a huge distorting effect on the ways people got to work, and the ways that truckers would take to get to port, for example. So you had huge lines of people to cross the untolled bridges, and as John Morgan said, you could play road hockey on the other bridges because nobody was using them. And the effect of that is a major impact on those communities where there are untolled bridges, and we're not using the publicly funded infrastructure that we should be using. So to get rid of those tolls, it addresses a couple things. One is obviously Vancouver is getting more and more expensive. People can't afford to live where they work, so they're having to commute in. The government stalled transit for 4 years by doing this referendum project and not having a plan for what happened after it failed. And so we lost 4 years of what should have been time spent building really great transit for Metro Vancouver.
Luckily, my understanding is that we've got quite a bit of time to deal with climate change. Is that correct?
I've heard those arguments. Yeah, definitely heard those arguments. Yeah. So I mean, it's quite a straightforward thing. We need a Metro Vancouver transportation plan that doesn't create these kinds of weird distortions and traffic jams that are artificially created, that actually makes it possible for people to get to work affordably and not sit in traffic. And we will do that. We also have a great carbon emissions plan that's going to reduce BC's emissions, and we're going to hit BC's carbon emission targets, something that the government abandoned a while ago, and we see rising carbon emissions now. So there's definitely a plan around addressing climate change and our carbon emissions. There's definitely a plan around Metro Vancouver transportation, but the tolls themselves, punishing people who are low income into forcing them to drive way out of their way to avoid the tolls when they can't afford to live anywhere else, didn't make sense to us.
No, I mean, as a friend of mine pointed out, I mean, if there's no toll to go from West Vancouver to Whistler on the new highway there, why should there be a toll on the, I mean, it just seems like
there's no toll planned in Kelowna West Side on the Premier's Bridge, right? So, yeah, I mean, where these tolls go is an important indicator of where the government's political preferences are.
I wanted as well to talk about one of, I think, the sort of major issues across British Columbia. We're, of course, here in the unceded traditional territories of Musqueam and Squamish people, I think, in this riding. The Liberal government has sort of tried to sweep under the carpet some of its uglier history on dealing with Indigenous rights in the province. The 2002 referendum that was not only locally but internationally condemned as basically an illegal referendum on Indigenous people's legal rights. Can you talk about the NDP plan to implement the UN Declaration and what changes we could expect in terms of dealing with the issues facing Indigenous nations in British Columbia.
Yeah, these are really fascinating times to be in British Columbia and be involved in government, because for the first time, the Supreme Court of Canada, in a recent decision, the Caribou-Chilcotin decision, found that First Nations in BC have actual title. So previously they made recommendations to government, you need to consult, you need to work with the First Nations, but for the first time they said, no, this First Nation has title to this land. And it's a major decision, and it's a transformative decision in modern British Columbia history because it recognizes the unceded nature of much of the province, and that there are legal rights here that need to be recognized. So it's not something you can vote on like BC Liberals did in 2002. This is just a fact.
Right.
And so it will be increasingly the role of the BC government to work in partnership with First Nations on how we work together to develop the shared resources of British Columbia. And what we've seen is a really uncertain approach to that from the BC Liberals. So for example, there was a treaty process, and George Abbott was hired to be the head of the treaty process. And then the Premier announced that she was canceling the treaty process, and she wasn't going to go ahead with that, and he was let go as the head of the Treaty Commission for British Columbia.
Tough economy, a lot of people are losing jobs.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was quite startling to us and to many First Nations who were partners at the table. And one of the issues that often gets overlooked, I mean, first, I just want to take a second and say how important it is to me and to our party that we have committed to implementing the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and also the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as part of healing that relationship with First Nations in our province. It's really important to us that that be key parts of the platform, and providing support to urban Aboriginal organizations like friendship centers and organizations that are First Nations run by urban Aboriginal people to make sure that people who aren't living on reserve, which is a huge number of people, have support and get to participate in this as well. It's critical to have that infrastructure so that First Nations organizations can participate in a meaningful way in that partnership with government relationships. So it's a really interesting and fascinating time. I hope that actually we're past the politics of whether or not this is something that's happening, because I think the court's been really clear. This is something that governments of all stripes need to be working on. Some days it's hard to tell. There's Pat Pym, who's MLA from Peace River country, has some big challenges in his perspective around the role of First Nations communities, but hopefully that's increasingly the exception.
Megan, let's go back to you and the internet.
Absolutely. So we've got a question from Alan on Facebook, and Alan says, "Hey David, many are concerned about progressive vote splitting. So what would you say to undecided Green-leaning voters to encourage them to support the NDP?"
And so this question, we're going to, I guess, presume that the Greens are a progressive party. Go ahead and provide your response.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I understand the dissatisfaction with the political status quo that would cause people to look at parties like the Green Party more favorably. But I really encourage people to look at the political realities of the situation, which is that in the vast majority of constituencies, this one included, the NDP and Liberals run 1 and 2. And if you're voting to change the system in BC, there are a couple of key priorities, I think, for people who are thinking about voting Green. One is they're unhappy with, as I am, the political donation system and the culture of our current government. The NDP would ban union corporate donations and strictly limit individual donations to address that. They're in favor of proportional representation to ensure that more perspectives are represented. The NDP is committed to a referendum provincially on a proportional representation system to ensure that different viewpoints are represented. So on just those 2 points alone, as a Green voter, you lend the NDP your votes and then work hard on the referendum campaign. I mean, it could be very significant for smaller third parties like the Green Party. And so I really encourage people to look at what the impact of that vote will be. If you want to get rid of this government, if you want to change the system, a vote for the NDP is the way to do it.
You were so much more civil about the Greens than I was.
Yeah,
I feel like I could learn a thing or two from you, David. I want to ask you a question about Uber and Lyft and the so-called sharing economy, which really it's an odd way of framing it. It's not particularly about sharing. It seems to me to be more about pawning off the kind of meager time and material resources that working people are left with. I don't particularly see it as a big liberation that, hey, you can use your card when you're not going to work. You can work some more, and you can sell the gold in your teeth for necklaces. But a lot of people are frustrated that the sort of ease or convenience of at the consumer end of services like Uber or Lyft won't be coming to town. How do you address those concerns?
I think a lot of people who have traveled and they've used Uber or Lyft in another city are like, wow, this is really convenient, works really well. I think a lot of people also recognize that Uber is not exactly a great corporate citizen. They had this defeat device on their app to try to trick regulators in other areas so that they wouldn't be able to be policed by them. And so what we need is, and there are going to be many more disruptive technologies like ride sharing and so on that come forward. What we need is a government that actually understands the role of doing a couple things. One is making sure that the rights of workers are protected. So when we look at Uber operating in other communities where they slowly ratchet back the wages that people are paid and they get paid less and less, making sure that drivers are adequately compensated for their time, that people with disabilities are able to access a ride, making sure that a licensing system actually addresses the public safety implications of someone picking you up in their private car. These are all things that we really should be talking about. And the problem with using them as political wedge issues, as the BC Liberals have, I mean, 2 years ago in the by-elections, they said, "Oh, we're all pro-rideshare. This if you vote for Liberals, you're going to see rideshare." They lost both those by-elections, by the way. But we had 2 years in the legislature after that where they didn't introduce anything about ride-sharing. They didn't introduce any bills. They didn't establish any groups that were going to look at best models from other places. They didn't look at what the impact was going to be on people who have invested family savings and taxi licenses and so on. So, I mean, I don't understand this approach of not talking about it in the legislature, which is the place designed to talk about this kind of stuff for 2 years, and then rolling it out right before an election, shortly after an RCMP investigation is announced into political donations. Oh, we're going to do ride sharing. It's a political issue of convenience. A lot of families will be affected by this, so we need to do it properly.
Mm-hmm. I want to take a moment to address the physicality of this space, if I may, because I'm learning a lot, I think, about being a talk show. I feel like if the desk were a foot and a half longer, I would be at a more attractive angle. And just in terms of head turning. Okay. So I'll know that for the next time. The other
gets into my wingspan.
The other, and I know this was a question from the internet because I received it on my Facebook. A friend of mine, my former sketch comedy partner who enjoys to see me humiliated, asked if we could stand up next to each other. Is that something we could do?
Yeah, it's something we can do, Charlie.
Okay, let's. So just this one's going up to. Look at that! It's really something. And just so you know, if you're watching at home, I'm 6'3". That's the reason I wanted to honor that request was because it came from Paul Bay, who is a local comedian, local writer, former teacher. He quit when Christy Clark was Minister of Education, then returned to teaching just in time for her to become Premier of British Columbia. So that one goes up to Paul Bay, who I hope is watching. And do we have any other either questions or requests for physical stunts from the internet?
Nothing for physical stunts, but I have had a request for you to stop being so funny. You're distracting people's coworkers.
Get out of here.
But I do have a serious question here.
Okay.
Serious one. So this is from Linda. She says, I'm the mother of Nick Lang. Can you expand on the NDP plans for youth with mental health and addiction issues? The Liberals have failed our youth for 16 years. Deaths have steadily increased. Please share your thoughts.
This is a real hard-hitting one for me because I was able to get treatment for free at the UBC Anxiety Clinic when I was in my early 20s. I was able to go and see psychologists there who, and of course, psychological treatment is not covered under anyone's sort of general health. Now that's something that I would have had, if I were the young man that I was then, would have had to go out of pocket for. So this is something that I really appreciate Linda's question, and I appreciate the personal, the personal point that she's put on it, and it's one that I'm very interested in hearing about as well.
Yeah, one of the first things that John Horgan did after becoming leader was establish a specific critic for the role of mental health, and that was my colleagues who handled this since retired. But in establishing a critic or a spokesperson role in the opposition, what you do is you assign importance to it. You say, this is something that we want to hold the government to account on. And there are all different aspects of mental health. We were talking about fentanyl earlier for people who are just tuning in, and the issues of addiction related to mental health. And there's also issues of people who are dealing with depression and anxiety. Part of our platform, a significant part of our platform, is making sure that services are available for people who are struggling with mental health. For example, if you go to UBC now and you need a mental health assessment in order to access services, there's a huge wait list to be able to get that. And if you can't wait on the wait list because you're really struggling, you have to pay privately to access that assessment in order to be able to access those services. So even the gate to get in to access what limited services are available is huge, and it's really difficult for people to get through. So that's why a key part of our platform is making sure that services are available for people who are struggling with mental health, whether it's on the addiction end of mental health, or whether quite profound disabling mental health issues, or even something that with cognitive behavioral therapy or appropriate diagnosis, people could get back to work, they could deal with what they're struggling with. That's what we see as our role as government. This is something that government should be doing. And from not just from a compassionate and a human rights perspective, but also from an economic perspective. Because if you have people who are too sick to go to work, but who could go back to work, that's an unnecessary public cost that we could be dealing with. And if people are going to emergency rooms because they get so sick, then that's expensive. So we could deal with this if we can help diagnose people earlier and get them the treatment they need and the support they need. That's a win for everybody. And tragic stories that affect far too many families across the province. We've been raising them in the legislature. People who go to an emergency room and end up committing suicides. We've got to fix this, and we can fix it. That's the problem. Is we know what the solutions are. We just need the political will to do it.
Seems to speak to, and I don't typically want to engage in this kind of moralistic language about politics, but it really seems to speak to just a general mean-spiritedness in the governance of this province over the last 16 years. I mean, there really just does seem to be this kind of cruel indifference that's playing out in all sorts of different ways.
It feels a bit like a political calculus where, you're going to make sure that if someone goes to an emergency room, that eventually they'll be able to see a doctor, because it's kind of embarrassing to have it featured on the news that people weren't able to see a doctor in an emergency room. But the political currency and the urgency isn't there for someone who has a long-term illness that's making it difficult for them to return to work or stay in work or go to school or stay in school, these kinds of things. And if we can get away with not doing it, then we will. And so too many government decisions are being informed under this government by one of two things. Is it going to swing a poll, or is it going to favor one of our rich insider friends or political donors? And we need to fix that. We can fix it.
We are just past the halfway mark here on David Eby Facebook Live. I think I got the name wrong. Facebook Live with David Eby, featuring Charlie Demers. So you have about half an hour to get your questions in. Hit us up online. I wanted to make a quick plug for what I think is a terrific book, and then segue into a relevant question. It's The Horrors by Charles Demers. So you've got internet open right now. Open a tab. Go purchase. So the book that I actually wanted to bring up, co-written by City Councillor Jeff Meigs and Globe and Mail, now retired Globe and Mail labor reporter Rod Mickleborough, and they wrote a book about the first NDP government in British Columbia. And the book is called The Art of the Impossible, and it's a fantastic book. And one of the things that struck me in reading it was just how many of the Dave Barrett government's reforms were about making BC a functional democratic polity. Like just things like the Hansard, things like opposition politicians having offices. And there's this weird thing when you're reading about what so-called British Columbia looked like, that it just was almost like a pre-democratic polity. And now it feels like we've moved into this post-democratic situation in British Columbia, where the legislature is not sitting, where there's just this kind of secrecy, almost by rote. It's the instinct of this. Rich Coleman wouldn't give you the documents that he promised about the Brendel land swap deal. I mean, can you talk a little bit about just the state of British Columbian democracy?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the legislature not saying. When I was first elected, a lot of friends were like, "So, moving to Victoria now, hey?" And
yeah.
I was like, well, so I thought, well, I'm going to be spending a lot of time there, but I'll be home when I can be home. And the first year I was elected, I think we sat for like 15 days.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And we didn't sit for 6 months this year. It's just, it's a strange thing when the government is supposedly advancing policy issues that they care about, like ride sharing, that we wouldn't be sitting in the legislature debating those bills. The housing minister saying he's going to close the loophole on fixed-term leases to prevent the avoidance of rent control, all these things, but we're not sitting in the legislature. And that doesn't even talk about all the committees, which is so inside baseball, but it is actually a way that the two parties can work together on important policy issues that affect the province. So you do a freedom of information request, you can't get the information you need, because the government is actually, the Premier's office is run on Post-it notes, where they write things on Post-it notes and put it up to avoid creating permanent records that could be subject to freedom of information. Where the housing minister says, oh, sure, I'll give you all the deals, all the paperwork on this BC housing deal worth $39 million on Hastings Street that's with a major BC Liberal donor. We'll give you all the paperwork on that, and then just doesn't. And then waits till the writ period starts when you can't compel BC Housing to provide that document to the public. I mean, how do you get away with not providing a $39 million contract that BC Housing signed with a major BC Liberal donor before an election? How do you get away with keeping that secret? To me, it is unfathomable. And yet that's exactly where we are. And it's actually one of the least of the major scandals affecting this government. I mean, we're talking about 2 RCMP investigations that are currently ongoing, and the health firings report that came out just before the election, where Robert Isaac committed suicide after he was smeared with a false RCMP investigation. It's just one thing after another.
Anyway, it's just such a weird place to live. Like, just because you don't. It's not like you meet people in British Columbia and they're any more cruel or what than anyone. Like, it seems that this government can only possibly still be standing based on this flow of unaccountable money coming in to prop them up. I'm editorializing. That said, I'm literally wearing an NDP button and sitting in front of a wall that just says David Eby all over it. So there is that. I mean, I'm not I didn't come out here pretending to be Edward R. Murrow, but it really is just a staggering thing to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why this government will not.
Can you account for the darkness in the human soul?
It's been a important part of our platform.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, like if the government cut off those big donations, I mean, the top 10 donors to this government gave millions and millions of dollars to prop up this BC Liberal Party. If they ended those donations, they would be in real trouble, and that's why you see them nowhere. In the New York Times, national news stories about the broken political donation system in BC, they will not change it because they know if they did, they wouldn't have that money to spend to convince people that what's against their interests is actually in their interests. And I think that is really the story of BC politics right there.
Mm-hmm. Megan, do we have anything from the people?
You better believe it. We've gotten this one on Twitter and on Facebook from a few people. So people would like to hear a little bit more about how you feel about Site C Dam and where you see that going.
Mm-hmm. There's a new report just out from UBC, I think today, suggesting that Site C, beyond any other questions of Indigenous title or climate change, is uneconomical. Anyway, that I've teed up where I sit on Site C Dam quite nicely. David, over to you.
I mean, Site C Dam is such a great example of how this government makes decisions. There's a body called the Utilities Commission that reviews major projects by the government around hydro to decide whether it's a good use of public money. The government did an end run around this commission and said we're not going to subject it to that kind of review. And then it turns out that a group of UBC researchers did the work of the Utilities Commission and reviewed this project, said it's going to cost taxpayers billions of dollars to run this project, even after the cost of construction, in losses, operating losses flowing from it, and that it's a really bad decision. And so why is the government doing this? Well, one of the reasons is that they had this failed LNG agenda where they said they were going to have 4 operating LNG plants by now. Obviously, they don't have any.
Our audience at home is sitting on their LNG cash, right? Like
right,
most of you are sitting on stacks
yes.
of $100 bills paid for with LNG.
That's right. And so, I mean, in the Northeast, the natural gas industry has collapsed because prices are so low. There's double-digit unemployment, and that's a very important political constituency to the premier. So she says she's going to build this giant dam. It's going to cost between $9 and $11 billion to do it. According to these UBC researchers, it makes absolutely no economic sense. I am not in favor of mortgaging our children's future to build a dam for electricity that we don't need. The commitment of our government is that, unfortunately, this government, the BC Liberals, is pushing this project through, has pushed this project through as far as they can, signing far-reaching contracts with huge penalties for cancellation. So we're going to put the whole thing to the Utilities Commission and say, how much is it going to cost us to finish this thing? How much is it going to cost us to abandon it? And we're going to make the best decision for BC taxpayers. It is an unbelievable example of poor governance and political decision making, and really it will be, whatever happens, a monument to the Christy Clark government.
Now, the Christy Clark government has also, you know, to say they've doubled down on this kind of extractivist economy, they've tripled, quadrupled down on in the face of you know, when the decisions on the table seem to be cataclysmic climate change or catastrophic climate change, to continue to want British Columbians to be drawers of water and hewers of wood, only, you know, instead of water and wood, gas and Alberta oil. What can the NDP, a party traditionally of working class people, of labor interests, what can the NDP tell people who feel that whatever the costs to the planet presented by those kinds of projects, at least they're jobs, at least there's something in the here and now. These people are economically anxious, and rightly so. What sort of better world can you offer, you individually, NDP, but also the party, to those people who are understandably attracted to talk of work?
Yeah, one of the realities of our province's economy is that a significant part of the province, mostly rural constituencies, really struggling economically. And any job is a good job for a family that needs to pay the rent, needs to pay for food, and these kinds of things. That's why you've seen in our platform a real commitment to a couple industries that built this province. And one of them is forestry. So we've lost 30,000 forestry jobs across the province. This is a renewable resource. It's a carbon sink. When a tree grows, it takes in carbon. If you use it in construction, it's a carbon sink at a time we need to use it. And yet what we're doing, instead of using BC wood and adding jobs, when we cut down the trees, adding jobs and processing that, we've lost a huge number of mills that have been disassembled and then reassembled in low-wage jurisdictions, in lower wage communities where the owner of the mill can make a greater profit from BC trees. So we've made a commitment that we're going to be building the housing that we're talking about, the seismic upgrades for schools, the government buildings, a huge program will be built from BC wood, and from not just BC wood, but cross-laminated timber, which is produced in British Columbia. It's amazing building material. We actually have to offer people real jobs that are meaningful for them in the communities where they live. Not just a work camp far away from home at the Site C Dam, but meaningful in the communities where they live. That's why we have the Power BC plan that would create power generation opportunities across the province in different communities, retrofits to make buildings more energy efficient. if you can't offer people real jobs, you can say green jobs, you can say technology jobs or whatever, but it's very abstract. You need to say, we're going to build this here, we're going to do this here in your community, and this is how we're going to create the jobs. So I think our platform does that quite successfully.
I mean, theoretically, you can have more people driving buses, and I mean, if we're seeing real commitment to transit infrastructure. I mean, I remember Mike Davis, American urban scholar, years ago, basically outlined that all of the best policies for fighting climate change were just all of the best policies for building robust social democratic public parks, public transit, sharing those kinds of resources. It seems to be anyway the whole kind of kit and caboodle. I wanted to talk to you about the schools as well, which we amazingly have gone 45 minutes and haven't really talked about what probably, or seems to me to be the single biggest weakness for the Christy Clark liberals, which is education. I mean, you're talking about seismic upgrades, but everything in the way they've handled schools in this province has just been a disaster, almost from day one. To put another personal spin on my horse in the race in this election, this is my final chance to ensure, yours too, that our kids go to school not under a BC Liberal education minister. Can you talk about just the colossally insane way that the BC Liberals have handled schools in this province, and the way they've treated teachers?
I think that one of the most disturbing outcomes of this government's approach to education is the fact that there's 15 years of kids now that have gone through school without the supports that they need for special ed, if they're struggling with something, they need extra support, without the supports for kids with extra gifts that can really excel if they're given extra supports, without the supports for kids who might have trouble with English or learning English, without the supports for them to really get their English skills down and to really succeed. All these kids that needed just a little bit more support for whatever reason, who didn't get it for 15 years because this government ripped up the contract with teachers, and that ultimately was reversed by the Supreme Court of Canada in 30 minutes. It took them 30 minutes to decide that what they had done was illegal.
Luckily, all those kids get second childhoods under the new.
Yeah, the court's order.
It's
very clear. Yeah. So I mean, and they fired the whole Vancouver school board when they refused to implement what it turns out was an illegal budget according to the Supreme Court of Canada. And so, for me, the loss of the opportunity for those kids, that whole generation of kids that didn't get the support that they needed, that is the story of this government in education, and that is the opportunity that's there for us. And it's not just kids. It's adults going to adult basic education where those programs have been shuttered or there's no fee.
I went to you may not believe this, but I failed grade 11 math, and I
do, yeah. It's such a big part of your life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm constantly doing quadratic equations, but I had just thought mostly, kind of on a lark. Maybe it would be nice to go back and just as a kind of personal self-improvement thing, see if I could do a couple of high school math classes, because it was something that at that time in my life I was just unable to kind of process. And I looked at the prices, it was unbelievable, or just the availability, and I thought, I'm a, relatively okay middle class guy who wants to go back and do these things, more or less for self-fulfillment. If you were in a situation where you needed these upgrades to, get into a training program, or you needed these upgrades to get yourself a job of some kind, I mean, it's absolutely, we talk about kids a lot when we talk about education, but it seems crazy. This is also, when you look at what has happened with university tuitions over the course of the life of this government, undoing the tuition freeze of the last NDP government, it just seems like they are seemingly ideologically inimical to education period.
And the idea of somebody coming to British Columbia as a new arrival has limited English skills, but an incredible professional background. We need professional level English to be an engineer, to do computer science, or whatever it is. There's a security guard I've been talking to in the lobby of one of the major media outlets, and I'm talking to him, and he's an expert in IT, but his English isn't up to snuff, so he's doing part-time English, but he can't get access to the language training that he needs because those programs have been closed or there are huge fees now attached to them. And it's crazy to me that we're wasting this huge amount of human potential in our province of people who need to do upgrades because they need to do it to get into a college training program or something like that to get the job that they need, or who need basic English or professional English to really use a full set of skills. I mean, we work hard to attract skilled immigrants to British Columbia, and then we say, well, we're not going to teach you English. You know, maybe you can work as a security guard in the lobby of an office building instead of
escorting the media workers who are being laid off from that. Yeah. It's a real circle of life that we've found ourselves enmeshed in here. We are in the last minutes of Facebook Live with David Eby featuring Charlie Demers. You have this will be your last chance to get in some questions, comments. You can explain what quadratic equations are to me finally, or why I might need them. Do we have anyone else out in the ether?
We do. We have a request and a question. So the request in the last 10 minutes is for David Eby, and it's if you can just speak up a little bit. We all know you to be a very soft-spoken man, so if you can just really project for the last 10 minutes, that'd be great.
I will.
But we have a question from Katya, picking up on what you guys were just talking about. So she says, between rising tuition and high cost of living, post-secondary education is fast becoming financially out of reach for many. Graduating with huge debts only puts students at an even greater disadvantage upon graduation. So what are the NDP's plans to make post-secondary education more affordable and accessible?
Thank you, Megan. I graduated with $5,000 of student debt. And I mean, I'm not 61. I mean, I graduated in 2003, 2 years after the election of our illustrious British Columbian government, with $5,000 of, from a lower middle upper working class family where I was, literally working the last year at SFU. When I was there, I was living on a $200 a week stipend working at the student newspaper. And I mean, even in that situation, I came out owing $5,000. I mean, sure, I still defaulted on that, and it did go to collections, and it was a whole big problem. But $5,000 feels manageable. I mean, the young people coming out of university today would kill to owe $5,000.
Yeah, BC students are graduating with the highest student debt in Canada. And the government refuses to acknowledge that. They only measure the student loan, public student loan portion of their debt. They don't measure the lines of credit, the credit cards, and all the other debt that the bank study did. That found that BC had the highest student debt of all the provinces in Canada.
Yeah, the credit card companies are like hot dog vendors at ballparks. If you go on any campus, and it's just the getting people to sign up for debt that they can be shaken down for afterwards.
And so one of the key commitments on the part of our government is to address a couple cost drivers for students who are going to school. One is for people who are graduating with student debt, getting rid of the interest period on public student loans. Number two, to implement the BC graduate student scholarship, so that if you're a graduate student, you're going to grad school, that there's a scholarship available for you to study here in British Columbia. And third, to build student housing. So many students are commuting in long distances, which are driving costs for them in areas with limited transit, so they have to drive in, it's really expensive. They can't find housing that they need, or they're paying crazy rents. We need to be building housing on campus. We've got a great plan to do that, build thousands of units on campuses across BC. There is no reason why Capilano University doesn't have a single student residence room. It makes absolutely no sense. And UBC has a waiting list of 10,000 students for housing. We get those students into student housing off of transit, and that'll help reduce a lot of their costs.
We're in the final stretch here. We are in the last 5 minutes of my hour with David Eby, or his hour with me, or your hour with both of us. Do we have, let's do maybe one last question from...
I got a good one for you for our last question. So this is...
And once more for Megan. I hope that you're clapping at home. I would be in very poor taste if you weren't.
I can't see you, so it's okay if you're not. So Linda asks, since you're sitting with a comedian, David, isn't it funny that Christy Clark didn't even win a seat in her own riding the last election? We have a premier who wasn't elected by the people, so I'll let you go out on that one.
Well,
You don't ever get tired of that question.
one thing that wasn't funny in the last election was that we should have won that election. We should have been successful in that campaign, and we weren't. And that's why it's really important for everybody to make sure that they're getting out and voting. And it's not hard to vote, and it's quite easy to vote actually. Even if you're not sure if you're registered, you just go to the local polling station and they'll help you vote. Make sure you bring ID and a bill with your address on it, and you'll be good to go. Everyone's got to vote. Higher voter turnout, bring a friend. Higher voter turnout means that parties like the NDP are far more successful, and if we can drive up voter turnout, I'm sure we'll be able to change the government. We can't afford to lose another election in BC to this BC Liberal government. 4 more years of this mess, it will be real trouble for British Columbians.
I agree heartily, as you may have guessed from the button on my shirt. Thank you very much, David. Thank you for watching and for your questions. Let's go on that. Make sure to register to vote. Get out there. There's early voting. E-Day is May 9th. Find your local NDP candidates. If you're not lucky enough to live in the beautiful riding of either Point Grey, Vancouver, or Vancouver, Point Grey, I forget. Yeah. Once, I was going to say one more time, but I haven't asked you to applaud. So once for David Eby, your once and future MLA. And now, this is the big budget item. Release the balloons. Want to know something? They didn't come from up top. That is the magic of Almost TV. Thank you very much for joining us.